Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
I'm Lindsey Deluce, and as we wind down the year, we're taking a look back at the stories that really made us put our thinking caps on.
I'm Kelsey McEwen. Thanks for joining us. From groundbreaking discoveries in health to the future of artificial intelligence, we're looking back on some of our favorite segments from 2024 that explored the giant world of science and technology.
And don't forget, you can watch us live, CTV Your Morning, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, and your CTV News app. Okay, so to kick things off this week, we are getting ready for life on Mars, but on Earth. After 378 days in near complete isolation, a NASA crew of 4 is finally reintegrating back to life on Earth. The crew grew their own food, they conducted spacewalks, and they monitored their health. Kelly Haston is a Canadian research scientist who was the mission's commander. She joins us this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
So, Kelly, I remember watching this footage. You exited a month ago and said hello to everyone, and we're so happy to be able to talk to other people. You've been outside the Mars simulation for exactly a month now. What's been the biggest challenge in readjusting?
Believe it or not, focus. We spent a year extremely focused on a series of tasks that were laid out for us each day. And there's so much stimuli in the real world, back on Earth, so to speak. And so you get really distracted easily because there's just so many things to think about, more apps to speak to people with, more sort of information flowing in all the time. So that's probably been my biggest challenge.
What's it been like to do everyday things, like go to the grocery store, for example? You wouldn't have been doing that in isolation.
Absolutely, yes. We actually ate similar diet to the meals that are available on the International Space Station, so astronaut food. So certainly going to a supermarket for the first time was a really big challenge to stay focused and actually understand what you were there to get. And also there's just a lot of selection and choice that you have to make. So yeah, it's a little overwhelming at times still.
So, Kel, I have so many questions for you. You're stuck in this building for more than a year with 3 other people, and the mental game of managing being around others in isolation, that is a lot of life to live together. What did you share?
So we did everything together from, all of the work, including and social time as well. We were a 4-person crew, and we were very intentional. So we really went through our day thinking, how do we help each other? How do we, collaborate to complete our goals? We played games together in our social time. We spent, we did many different activities, including, as I mentioned, games, but also crafting and other things. We came up with things to do, and we celebrated for each other, both our own personal milestones, the mission's milestones, and then sometimes our loved ones' milestones or birthdays and so forth too. Anything to make you help your crewmate feel connected back to the people that they're missing.
What did you find that you missed when you were in isolation?
People. I am an avid outdoors person. I run ultras, so I am a trail runner, and I run long distances, and I spend a lot of time backpacking with my friends. But even though I thought I was going to miss the outdoors desperately, and I really did by the end miss the outdoors, I missed people the most. It is amazing how much you miss the people that are in your life. Even when you're communicating, we were able to communicate by email, but in delay. So we had a delay of any form when we sent out an email based on how far Earth was from Mars at a given time in the mission. And so speaking to people directly, being there for your friends and family when they need you, that was absolutely the thing that I missed the most.
I mean, aside from the human interest part of it, NASA was looking for some research. What information did they take from your time in simulation?
Yeah, so we had a set series of work that we did inside that simulated the way that you would do work on if you were actually doing a Mars mission. So we were collecting data, we were doing maintenance on the habitat, we were doing many different things both inside inside the habitat, and we would also do EVAs or extravehicular activities where we did Mars walks outside, where we also had to do tasks. But on top of all of the data we were collecting as part of our InSide mission, so the mission that was mimicking life on Mars, they also were collecting data on us in many different aspects. So physiological data, exercise data, so forth, and then also psychology data as well. So we did a tremendous amount of testing during the mission so that the researchers that were studying us could accomplish their goals.
I have to let you go, but I have one final question for you. You've done the simulation. Would you sign up for the real thing?
It's so interesting. I don't know. I would love to go to space. That would be an incredibly unique opportunity and challenge. But a Mars mission would be more than the year that we spent doing this analog. It would actually be probably 3 to even 5 years, depending on the goals. And that would be a very long time to go away from your family. The opportunity to be one of the first people, if not the first person to see Mars with your eyes would be incredible.
Kelly, great conversation today. I'm so glad to meet you. Thanks for coming on Your Morning.
Thank you so much.
Cities across eastern Canada have been prepping all weekend for today's solar eclipse. One man, though, maybe a little more dedicated than most. Evan Zucker is a passionate eclipse chaser, or umbraphile. He and his wife Paula have been on a cross-continent trip from San Diego, California, all the way to Quebec in search of the perfect place to view the eclipse. And Zucker has seen 9 eclipses in his life and is one of the millions of people who are looking forward to this total eclipse, which occurs once in a generation, as we know. So joining us this morning, live from Ascot Corner, Quebec, from directly under the eclipse's expected path is the man himself, Evan Zucker. Hey, welcome to Your Morning and good to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, where are you right now exactly? What are you excited for today?
Well, exactly. I'm on the side of a farm road in Ascot Corner, and we're excited about having clear skies, we hope. We're real nervous about some high cirrus clouds coming in from the southwest, and we hope they wait until after totality before they make an appearance.
Listen, I see a full car in behind you, so tell me what you've packed there and what your process looks like when you're getting set up to see this eclipse.
Well, we have a good-sized SUV, but it's packed to the gills. We have, 11 cameras, 12 tripods, 3 telescopes. I don't know how much other stuff, and that's why we needed a large open space where we set all this stuff up, because obviously it takes up some space, maybe about 150 square meters.
So 9 eclipses, as we shared with everybody, is what you've seen. What are you most excited about today's eclipse?
Well, 9 total solar eclipses. I've seen a lot of other type, but today is a relatively long eclipse. And for us, it's the last one that we can easily get to because it's on the North American continent. It'll be 2044 before the next one, and I probably won't be driving long distances in 2044. So for us, it was exciting to be able to take all our stuff, because if I fly off to Spain in 2026 or Luxor in 2027, I won't be taking too much stuff with me.
So this way you can bring all your gear. I understand you made reservations at places to stay right across America, making sure you would be in the right place when the eclipse arrives. So you called ahead and you sort of guessed the path. And that trip took you from San Diego to New Mexico, up over the Texas Panhandle, then through St. Louis, Ohio, to New York, and now you've landed in Quebec. That is an odyssey. When did you and your wife start planning this campaign?
Oh, years ago. I mean, I guess right after the 2017 eclipse. A nice thing about eclipses is you know exactly when they're going to come. So I've always known, well, I'll be 69 years old for that eclipse, and it's been in the works for a while. The hotel reservations I made 1 year before, because that's the earliest you can usually do that.
Right. Something tells me you're a planner, Evan. So tell me, once everything is set up, what is it about a solar eclipse that is so magical, that draws you all the way across the continent?
It's the most spectacular natural sight you can see on Earth. We've seen lots of great natural sights, the Grand Canyon, the Northern Lights, wildlife, but this is a very emotional, visceral sight. Anybody who's seen one will know that. Hopefully a lot of your viewers will be able to see this one, and then they'll know.
Okay, let me pull on some of your expertise. What can we expect to happen? Like, does the temperature change? Do the animals act differently? What's your experience?
Well, the temperature will change. In fact, I have a digital thermometer with me so I can track that. And just on the drive here just this morning from Sherbrooke, we saw some wild turkeys. At the field yesterday, we had some deer, ducks. So we're going to be interested in seeing how the animals react. But it'll definitely get cooler. It'll get darker. And then during totality, it'll be basically as dark as night. And animals and people can react oddly to that.
I feel like we're acting oddly already today. It's been a weird start. I don't know about for you and your wife, Paula, but it's been a weird one here.
Very much.
Okay, Evan, thank you so much for coming on today. I am so excited, and I know you are as well. So thanks for joining us this morning,
Yes.
and best of luck with all that setup.
Thank you.
A solid relationship relies on a real connection, but as we're starting to discover, that connection doesn't necessarily need to be with another human being.
Companies are now creating AI chatbots called companion bots. They exist solely for the purpose of forming relationships with human users. Tech analyst Carmi Levy joined us to discuss.
We also spoke with the neurologist behind a project to comfort palliative care patients using virtual reality. Take a listen.
More people are turning to AI girlfriends and boyfriends to find love or to practice dating. Some say this form of digital love is unhealthy. Others suggest it helps fight loneliness. So what are the pros and cons, and what does this say about the power of AI? For all of this and more, we're going to take a deep dive with tech analyst Carmi Levy. Hey, Carmi, good morning. This is really you, right? No AI? I feel like I have to check these days.
I promise you it's human, Carmi.
Awesome. Okay, here's the first question. When I hear about this, how do these AI companions actually work? Is it all text? Is there video attached?
Well, anyone who's ever used ChatGPT or Google Gemini, those chat bots that have become very popular over the last year or so, this is very similar. It's a text-based exchange, and basically they are very much like those chatbots that we've been using all along, but they're specialized. And we've seen the industry sort of respond to the arrival of ChatGPT with the release of specialized chatbots that can do things like customer support, marketing, even support healthcare. And so now these are digital companion bots that are almost like the versions of ChatGPT that can focus specifically on relationship management, those kinds of connections.
It is fascinating, you know, especially when you consider, we know this, loneliness, the condition of loneliness is considered a national epidemic, and that's not just in this country. In 2021, 1 in 10 people over the age of 15 said they always or often feel lonely. We know loneliness is linked to a number of health conditions. Now, this AI connection may not be for everybody, but is using a chatbot better than being lonely?
Well, I mean, you know, anything is worth trying, and we've been using technology all along to overcome loneliness. Pick up a smartphone and play a game, or scroll through social media. That's a form of using technology to overcome loneliness. And so, first of all, most of us are doing this. Second of all, I don't think it's really up to us to judge others how they use technology in a harm-free way to keep themselves connected. And so, I think this is normal. This builds on earlier experiences with technology where we run into kind of moral and ethical issues. Is that this isn't just a game, that in some cases we might cross the line between believing that this is just technology and kind of understanding where those limits are, and maybe not, and actually thinking that we're communicating with a sentient being, which of course can get us into trouble. AI sort of takes what we've used previously and might put us into situations that can get us into that kind of trouble.
And that line I guess you're referring to is sort of like romantic relationship feelings. So if people are already able to form those romantic relationship with a chatbot, for example, what could the future look like once the technology advances? We're already seeing things like Sora, for example, that can take text and turn it into video. So when you're looking at chatbots that are able to take on, maybe even way down the road, we're talking Black Mirror stuff, but physical form like humanoids.
This is definitely a dystopian, somewhat nightmarish Hollywood future. And I think as that fidelity becomes almost impossible to distinguish between real and not real, I think that's where things become problematic. In other words, in some cases, there may be individuals that because these technologies are so sophisticated, the video is so incredibly real, so lifelike and human-like, that we will literally think that we're interacting with a human being. And that opens up just a Pandora's box of mental health concerns, crime concerns, what is good for society. We've already seen, for example, individuals just with these text-based tools, be convinced to do things that they probably shouldn't do. There was an individual in the UK who was convinced by a companion bot to assassinate the Queen. He's now in jail. There was a gentleman last year in Belgium who was convinced by a chatbot to end his life. Sadly, he did. And so even without that fidelity, Anne-Marie, we are already in problematic territory. And quite frankly, I think that conversation needs to happen now before the technology gets even better than it already is.
Well, I had not heard of those examples. Carmi, this was a fascinating discussion. I'm glad it's you in real life. Thanks so much for coming on.
Me too. Thanks so much, Anne-Marie.
Can virtual reality offer comfort at the end of life? That is the question that researchers in Montreal are looking to answer. They're set to begin a new study that will see patients in palliative care use VR headsets while they measure the effects that has on pain and the patient's anxiety. Alexander Moreno is a neuropsychologist and professor at the University of Montreal. He's leading this study. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Lindsay.
So I understand you're in the process right now of finding patients willing to participate in this study. What gave you this idea in the first place?
Well, it was basically part of my clinical practice as a psychologist in an end-of-life care unit. And what we saw with this unit is that, we use different non-pharmacological approaches, including zootherapy, massage therapy, musical therapy. And we started to review the literature and found out that virtual reality could be used to manage anxiety and pain in these patients.
Escapism and letting them see something different, the world through a different set of eyes. So, Professor, tell us how this works. What are they actually seeing when they put on the headset?
Well, basically, the VR content is called Come With Me, which uses high-quality video content and sound. It was developed by a Canadian startup in Montreal called Nipper Media. So I work closely with a filmmaker, and we're basically co-constructing and co-developing the content to adapt it to individuals in palliative care. So it's basically what they see are in a 10-minute session, they visit a pre-established passive scenario that can be nature or a beach or even visit the city.
What we're looking at right now, some of the images you're talking about. And then how will you measure how effective this is in reducing pain and anxiety?
Normally, what we use are standardized scales where we target pain, tiredness, nausea, depression, drowsiness, appetite, general feelings of well-being, and all of this is measured before the intervention. Then the person goes through the intervention, the 10-minute intervention, and at the end, we ask the same questions to see how it has changed following the intervention.
You'll also be allowing family members of patients to participate. How will they get involved in this?
Well, this is very interesting because loved ones, family caregivers, are what are often considered like, I quote, ghost patients. And research has shown that between 15 and 48% of loved ones of people with chronic illnesses will develop depression or complicated grief after their death. So the implementation of this virtual reality content makes it possible to focus on positive experiences at the end of life. So it has the potential to change the experience of people in palliative care and to mitigate these intense emotional reactions of loved ones, and even the potential to become a prevention strategy for grief and loss. So it can change the way in which people accept and even prepare for grief. So if the person at the end of life is more alert in terms of we're using less medication and they're less confused and they're still managing to have a positive experience, this new dynamic can have a positive effect on the diet. So there is a reduction in the negative emotional experiences, and that provides positive and meaningful moments during the final moment of their lives.
Well, it's fascinating. Stay in touch with us. We're really curious to see how this rolls out. Thanks so much.
We're glad that you're enjoying Your Morning, the podcast. Every week, we bring you some of the most interesting conversations from the show on a wide variety of topics. And of course, we'd always love if you joined us live weekdays, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app.
So next up, early onset Parkinson's threatened to take a guitar from one musician's hands for good, but he is now playing again, thanks to a doctor he once shared the stage with.
Also ahead, researchers at Ontario's Western University have made a major breakthrough in ALS treatment. Here are those conversations.
ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive disease that attacks muscle, eventually ending in paralysis. There is currently no cure, but thanks to a new breakthrough out of Western University, that could change. Led by Michael Strong, the team of researchers discovered a protein which changes and reduces damage to nerve cells. According to the ALS Society, there are around 3,000 Canadians over the age, or I should say 4,000 Canadians over the age of 18 living with ALS. So how could this scientific breakthrough really help? For more, we are joined by the Arthur J. Hudson Chair in ALS Research at Western's Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, professor and scientist Michael Strong. Welcome to the show.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about this breakthrough and how the new protein works.
So it's the most common thing that we see when we look in the motor neurons of somebody who's passed away from ALS. The motor neurons are the cells from the spinal cord that get out to the muscle. It's the muscle that pays the price when those nerves don't work. So we see this almost like a train wreck of materials sitting within these cells. And it's composed of one particular protein in predominance. What we found is almost a partner protein to that, which seems to balance off the toxicity, so that when we create a model where we get the pathology and then treat it with this other protein, the aggregates, the train wreck is still there, but it doesn't seem to affect the cell at all. And we get normal motor function, or we get significant mitigation of the disease process.
It's really incredible. You want to take this trial in 3 to 5 years, right? Why is ALS such a difficult disease to work on?
It's been a really challenging disease because it's not a single disease entity. It has multiple different origins. So for instance, a proportion of patients will have a genetic risk factor for this. Others will have genes which modify how the disease actually presents for it. But the common thing is that underneath it all seems to be this one common pathway. And that's been the discovery, not by us, but by many across the world. So understanding that simplified it, but up until then, it was incredibly challenging.
This is an international project, including teams in Canada, the U.S., Italy, more other countries as well. This breakthrough has been, more than 15 years in the making? What has been Canada's role in this?
So Canadian investigators, we tend to be really quiet about what we've done, but Canada has really played quite a lead role in ALS research, particularly these types of cellular changes that can occur in these groups of cells. And so when you think about work that's come out of Laval or Montreal or UBC or otherwise, or research across this country has really paved the way to understanding how these changes can be toxic to a cell. And so our work builds on that of others across the country. We tend to be rather quiet about it, but Canada's really been a leader in the world in this kind of research.
It really is incredible. You've spoken about making this your life's work and your passion for working with the ALS community. What does this breakthrough mean to you as a scientist?
Well, both as a scientist as well as a clinician, it means I can sit down with my patients and, as I've done for maybe 30 years, be able to say, look, we're working on this. We're trying to understand it. We think we know the direction that we're going in. The conversation now is all of that, plus I think we can now see the horizon. I think we know what we're heading for now. And that makes all the difference in the world. It may not help the person who's got it today,
right?
But it will help those coming down the path.
I was going to ask you about that. Somebody watching right now, living with ALS, thinking, could this help me? So this is still a couple years away, you think?
It still is, a good 3 to 5 with a lot of hurdles in front of us. And I've been around long enough to see that these kinds of models, and this is probably one of the best series of results I've seen from any of the work done. You can still stumble on a hurdle. It may not work later on, or it may be too toxic later on. So we've got all of that to go through. But boy, it's nice to have that to go through, to be honest.
Absolutely. Congratulations to you and your team, Professor Strong. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Fabio Dwyer was barely 40 when the symptoms began. Trouble moving his hand, trouble walking, talking, and swallowing. And then came the diagnosis, early onset Parkinson's disease. The musician and co-owner of the Toronto's Mill School of Music soon lost the ability to do the thing he loved the most, and that was play the guitar. But day thanks to the remarkable power of deep brain stimulation and the work of a neurologist who once shared the stage with Fabio jamming. He's back jamming like his old self again. You can actually see him there on the keys. Fabio is with us this morning alongside Dr. Alfonso Fasano of the University Health Network's Krembil Brain Institute. Great to have you both here in person.
Thank you. Good morning.
I can't wait to hear more about your story and your joint efforts together. Fabio, music wasn't just your passion, it was also your job. It was your livelihood. What was it like in the early days once you received your diagnosis?
Well, it was really traumatic because I was so young for Parkinson's. 41 years old, my daughter was 1 year old.
Your daughter was one?
One only. And she grew up with seeing her father going down health-wise. And it was very traumatic. It was like the loss of my livelihood, the loss of my identity. It was a very difficult moment of my life. I thought that was over.
Yeah, I can imagine. Dr. Fasano, you knew Fabio even before he was a patient because, as we pointed out, you're a fellow musician. You were in the same band for a while, in fact. So what made Fabio a good candidate for this treatment, and what did it actually entail?
Yeah, it was quite surprising for me to meet Fabio in my waiting room one day. I heard that he had some problems, but I didn't realize that he was requiring a brain operation. And what made Fabio a good candidate was the type of problems he had, but also his age and the fact he was very motivated. And this is what we want to see in our patients. And DBS has been very helpful to him.
Fabio, your doctors estimate that you've now recovered 95% of your guitar playing ability, which is just incredible. How does it feel to be back on stage making music, performing music?
I have a second chance now to get things done right. I have been much more focused on my work, my passion, on the music styles that I like, not only to pay the bills and have a livelihood, but doing a statement as an artist. It's a great second chance.
You mentioned your daughter, so I'm going to ask you, what has it meant in the life of being a dad?
Oh, that's like the energy that you have to have a father after 40 years
Yes.
old. I was 40, is enormous, and I was going exactly the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Right. So she has been the reason why I have been fighting. She, my wife, and my stepson, the reason that I have been fighting so hard to be back and to be in good shape again.
Yeah, great motivation. And you were talking, he was so motivated. How much are we learning about the potential of DBS as we make advances with the technology that's involved? Because it's increasing at a fast pace, which is encouraging.
It's true. DBS is not an experimental procedure. It's been around for 3 decades now, especially for conditions like Parkinson's disease, tremor, dystonia, but has a lot of potentials, and this is because we're learning other conditions better. There are many new indications from depression to dementia, and also because technology is advancing and we have now better tools. For example, in the case of Fabio, we could use a device that reads inside his brain. We can record his brain activity and use that to adjust the settings, which is what we did.
I'm talking to you in your doctor role of seeing him as a good candidate and knowing you can help, but what does it feel like to watch him perform on stage?
Well, I joke with him and I say that he's playing better now than when we used to play together. But jokes aside, I can see that he's back to the old Fabio. My skills as musicians have declined, unfortunately, because you need to practice on a daily basis, and with my job, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But what Fabio did, which is very important for every patient that is hearing at home, is that he wasn't just happy with the results. He really went back to his instrument and started practicing day by day, leveraging really the improvement of the motor skills. And this is what every person should be doing. Once you get better because of what doctors did to you, that's not the end of the story. You need to practice, you need to exercise, you need to do physiotherapy, and this is really what Fabio is teaching us today.
Thank you both for being here, for sharing your music with us and your incredible story. Great to speak with both of you today.
Thank you.
Okay, so we know it's obviously dangerous to mix drugs and alcohol, but what about drugs and sharks?
Okay, I am no marine biologist, but I imagine that would also be extremely dangerous.
All right, well, I guess you'll have to keep listening to find out. But first, strange sightings in the skies over the prairies.
So can you imagine being a pilot and coming across something like this?
Like formation, lights real bright, left and right, really high.
So pilots from Air Canada, pilots from Flair, listen.
A different direction, and then come back.
What? Yeah, so Air Canada pilots, Flair pilots, and Morningstar Air Express pilots say they saw these strange triangular groups of lights high above the prairies on several flights across the country. The pilots told air traffic control that the lights were too high up to be fighter jets and moving too oddly to be satellites. So what exactly could they be? Joining us for more on these cosmic claims is Dan Riskin, CTV science and technology expert. Dan, welcome to the show.
Wow, it's so exciting to be here. I feel like I'm on X-Files. This is exciting.
Isn't it exciting? So we have a recording of the pilots in the air trying to make sense of what they're seeing. So together, let's take a listen to this.
We see multiple lights.
Could it be the Starlink?
Negative, I don't think so. Starlink doesn't flash. It's like 4.
So they're talking, do you think this is Starlink? No, Starlink doesn't flash. So these aren't conspiracy theorists talking here. These are pilots, air traffic controllers. They're used to spending hours and hours looking at the sky. How significant do you think it is that these pros are kind of at a loss? They don't know what they're looking at.
I mean, I think you have to investigate these things. You have to look into it. It's really easy to land on one side or the other and say, well, one, there are aliens. The government knows this. They've been keeping it a secret for a long time. There's that camp, the Mulder camp. Mm-hmm. Then there's the Scully camp, which is, until I get proof, I'm just not going to believe anything. And those two sides can be united if we all get an agreement that we just want to look at the data and see what the data show and just have an open mind about it. So the problem right now is that there is not a really clear way for these kinds of sightings to be cataloged or organized. And if somebody sees something, there's no instruction about what data need to be collected. It would be very helpful to know exactly where you are, what you're seeing, to have a recording of it, to know which direction the recording is coming from, just in case somebody else is seeing it at the same time from another plane, so that then you can triangulate exactly where it's happening and get a better estimate of altitude, for example. So what needs to change is the way that all of this reporting happens. But these kinds of sightings, they've gone back as long as there have been humans. We've always seen things in the sky that we've tried to explain, and that may be because there have always been aliens, or maybe because there have never been aliens, and we just don't know at this stage.
Okay, I need to know what you think. What do you saw this, you heard them talking. What do you make of this?
I mean, I have a hard time believing that there are aliens that are visiting us, floating just out of sight and not making themselves more known. I think ultimately these things can all probably be explained, but that's a hypothesis and it needs to be tested. And I am open to the idea that I'm wrong. And so what I want to see is a change in the relationship between the data, the government, and the people that are collecting these data. So for example, if you look at the way that the birding world has changed in the last couple decades, it used to be that people saw birds when they were working for the government. They wrote it in a book somewhere and it stayed in a shelf. And if you wanted to know what the bird data said, you had to ask the government for it. Now everything is online. If I see a bird, I take a picture of it, I put it onto eBird, and everybody who's interested in birds can see my data. True. That kind of open science approach for UFOs would be a game changer. And I think we're moving in that direction. But if these pilots were just reporting it into a database where everybody had access, I think there would be a lot less willingness for people to say, oh, there's a conspiracy cover-up, because everybody would see the data and we could all talk about them
like
together.
A centralized service. Listen, it is fascinating. I'm glad you're here to discuss with me. Dan Riskin, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Well, as if sharks weren't scary enough already, now they're on drugs. Researchers in Brazil recently tested 13 different sharks for cocaine and found the drug present in all of them. The discovery raising a lot of questions about how widespread the drug could be in shark populations and what it means for their behavior. Joining us with more this morning is Tracy Fanara. She's an environmental engineer. Great to have you with us on this story.
Thanks so much for having me.
I have to start with what made researchers test sharks for cocaine in the first place?
Well, I don't know if our documentary actually inspired them or just inspired the name, but I was on a show called Cocaine Sharks last year, co-hosted for Shark Week, and that was a play on Cocaine Bear. You think about how statistically achievable a bear on cocaine is, and that those statistics are very unlikely. But when it comes to sharks, they're interacting with this drug a lot more often.
Okay, let's talk about that. How is it getting into their bodies?
Well, in Brazil, this study was done in Rio de Janeiro, and this study says that there are 3 different pathways that these sharks may have been in contact with the drug, by bales of cocaine thrown off ships. But I think that is probably most likely the least likely Sorry, the least likely way. The two other ways are production facilities on land and wastewater releases, because wastewater treatment plants only treat water to a certain point, and a lot of chemicals are not removed.
Well, the dose detected in sharks, we know, was relatively small. But what could the consumption of the drug mean for the behavior or the health of sharks? People typically think of sharks as very aggressive to begin with.
They do, and it's interesting because in all of my interactions with sharks, I've probably only come in contact with a few that were even very energetic and not running away. But that is a really good question. What does it do to the behavior of sharks? In this study, there was no behavior actually noted. The sharks got to the scientists already deceased. However, we know with other species in other places, they've had very different reactions to the drug. Some species actually slow down, like eels. Their processes is slowed down to the point where they missed migration periods, which are essential for their life cycle. So not only cocaine is in the water, we have a whole bunch of pharmaceuticals, antidepressants, herbicides, insecticides, all of these chemicals entering the ecosystem. And the question is, how does the suite of chemicals actually impact ecology from the base of the ecosystem up? I mean, bacteria, phytoplankton, all the way to sharks.
Listen, cocaine sharks is definitely a story that got our attention. Tracy Fanara, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being with us today.
For more great conversations, download or hit subscribe to Your Morning, the podcast, on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget, watch us live weekday mornings on CTV, CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.